question. Are there any places where I can charge my laptop that are near, reasonably near?
So I have to sit here.
Yeah, of course. I don't want to, like, you know. Is it on here or no? There's none here. Maybe I can reach it from there, yeah. That'd be pretty probably.
Alright, hi everyone, welcome to round 8 of World. My name is Joel. My preferred pronouns are they and them. I'm the chair for this round. Can I have my panelists introduce themselves in the following order of Amelia and André?
So hello, I'm Amelia Financial.
André, begin the time.
Alright, can we begin with the OG then OOCGCO introduction?
Hi, I'll be speaking first. I have no preferred pronouns.
Hinton speaking second, no preferred pronouns.
Sorry, I didn't know. Diggory speaking first.
Nicholas Allen speaking second, please. Thank you.
CG Bun speaking first, Ethan and Isabel speaking second, no press. Thank you.
Alright, Sio?
Hello, member 12, please here. See you there.
What was there? She here, thanks.
Alright, without further ado, can we invite the Prime Minister to speak on the motion about immortality? Here.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Living as an individual is terrible right now because you are crippled by the fear of the unknown, by the fear that you are running out of time to fulfill all your dreams and ambition, and by the multiplicity of things that could kill you, e.g. things like random accidents, illnesses, etc., that ultimately make the quality of life worse. The point is then, coming from open government, that as an average individual, we would prefer to live forever and be immortal. The first thing I want to clarify is what this motion is about. The motion is obviously about the after in the world today, but more importantly, the motion is about the choice of whether or not we would want to opt into this to begin with, right? It's analysis of whether or not this is an individual's preference based on the lived experience and the capacity to understand this choice. And it's important to acknowledge that we ought to take into account what is most proximate. As an individual today, things that happen 50 trillion years in the future are probably not as proximate, and you probably wouldn't feel these things as heavily because you want to make the choice today based on what you currently know and with the information about what you have right now. That is to say, it is not about a debate whether it is good to live forever, but rather if the average person right now would want to make the choice.
Yeah.
Next, policy later. The point stage in which you make this choice, it obviously also means you can't do things like get sick. And the rationale is very simple. Sickness itself is cell death, and if you are immortal, you cannot die. Your cells also probably cannot die as a real adult, and that is why you would like to live in good health, you would like to live forever, and you cannot fiat against that. There are two simple things that I want to argue from OG. The first is why people fear death, and the second is why you are likely to live well and comfortably on the cycle of government. First, the reasons why people fear death, and we would solve this under immortality. First, there are 3 reasons why. The first is there's just a proximate biological fear of death. Every single fiber of your being wants to be alive. That is why you have biological responses at the point in time that you get sick. Your white blood cells come into action. Even in the times that you try to end your life, there is still a biological attempt to gasp for air and try to fight back, even if mentally this is something you do not want to do. It is the human mind that compels you to live. Secondly, there is ultimately a culture of fear that is prevalent in society. There is a common negative experience of death, of seeing a loved one, seeing them be decrepit, and understanding that your experience is a terrible thing that makes you afraid of death as well. There are also external factors like religion. For a lot of religious people, it's the idea of hell and the fact that I could go to a very bad place that I don't know about. Or even for atheists who don't understand if there is a void, if there is nothing, that ultimately makes it so that the uncertainty is one that is terrible for a lot of people. The third thing is, the absence of living is really important for people, right? That is to say, if you are not alive, you don't fulfill things like dreams and ambitions, or even caring for your friends and family who you probably deeply want to see succeed, want to ensure that they are taken into account for and be able to provide for them. The last thing is death is painful. Insofar as you will not have a biological response to fix death, but more importantly, the legacy you leave at the point in time you die is terrible. You are not in control of that. Your family might have to take care of you with old age when you have Alzheimer's. Your family, for example, might see you be decrepit in bed, and you have no control of whether or not they remember you as a strong fighter or someone who was simply in that bed, etc., which is ultimately dehumanizing for the human person. Also, just like aging in and of itself is something that automatically makes people fear a lot worse. They are less in control of your body. Your bodily functions start shutting down. You are not able to control a lot more things in your life, and you are just less energetic in general. Why does this matter the most already off the bat? First, is the universality of this. It is a literally everyone experiences this. It is coerced under these institutions and mindsets by the media, movies, television, cultural norms, etc. Secondly, it is on scale. End of life is prior because the life is prerequisite to being able to make choices to begin with, to be human to begin with, which is why we ought to value this and be able to live forever. The third thing is, even if living longer is worse, I think that the comparative is far worse, right? You probably want to see your friends and family ensure they are able to succeed in life, be able to watch out for them. Okay, so even if you don't care about your life, you have the advantage of being able to at least see other people's lives through and ensure that they have a good life at the end of the day, or they have someone there for them to be able to see them through. But it's also the legacy you are able to control at the point in time you can live forever. That is to say, your family, your friends can remember you as a good person, or at least how you would want to be remembered if it's like a bad person, and that is something that's essentially good. It is the most existential risk, and even if there are ways that often see that are speculative parts in the future, or why you could perhaps regret this, there is less proximate to you as a person currently right now, because it is not a compelling debate to simply that perhaps you might regret this, etc., etc. Before I go on, I would like to be wife clothing.
Yeah, you say you're religious, so you're scared of death. How do religious people treat immortals or individuals they deem to be weird?
So, Jesus was very reverent in their religion, right? There are a lot of instances in which we hold these people to very high standards. You can leverage your immortality oftentimes, which is very good for you as an individual. Secondly, why it is good that you are able to live long and why you're likely to live comfortably. I think that there are very many reasons why you have an infinite potential for growth if you are immortal. There are 3 reasons why you are likely to live well and comfortably. The first is you can leverage this immortality. That is to say, you are probably going to be the best worker because you can work beyond any hours. You are the most profitable and therefore more likely to be hired, or even on the idea that you are just able to do so many more things and fulfill so many more of your ambitions that allow you to generate profit, or allow you to just be happy as a person. Secondly, is being alive that you take advantage of time. Like say, you can invest $1 a day, and in the next 10 years that could exponentially increase, and you're able to take advantage of that. Or even just being able to get a multiplicity of educational degrees allow you to be a more informed person, also a more hireable person, or even a person who can start up their own business, for example, and allow you to fulfill your own dreams and aspirations. The last thing is, even if maybe you are someone in poverty and you can't lift yourself up from it as a result of this motion, there are high reasons why we believe that the trajectory of life in general is just getting better. For the reason that there are more respects with things like human rights, there is higher increase in the amount of medicines we are discovering and the amount of access we are able to give these medicines, or even on being able to provide education that has become a priority for all countries around the world to be able to ensure that everyone has equal access to these types of things. Why are these the most important things in the debate? The first is the key to fulfillment, insofar as you aren't set activity you want, and it is the limitless potential you have if you are immortal that makes it so that you are likely to be more fulfilled on death. Secondly, it is formational. Insofar as you live to see the world getting better, or you live in the future, you're able to intake optimism, or even if it is not that the world's getting better, it is the fact that you're able to accrue many experiences that is good on our side because you're able to form yourself into a better person, or form yourself into like a different person, or even the capacity to form yourself into a person who you want because you have more choices, more time, etc. The last thing is, even if you can't feel satisfaction from your own achievements and from your own immortality, you can at least protect yourself from any form of dissatisfaction. E.g., maybe in the future they will start things like memory wipe and allow you to forget, for example, a few hundred years of your life, or even the idea that you can at least fill yourself up with drugs and coke because you aren't afraid that you might get sick and hospitalized because you are immortal and you are immune from these types of things. Clearly, people are happier, people have more experience that are value added to their life, and we at least, at the very least, safeguard people from any types of unhappiness and pain you have on the side of opposition. For all these reasons, clearly OG. Thanks.
And let's speak of that speech. We invite the leader of opposition to introduce Paul's case here.
Is this?
I thought that and I got here too.
Oh,
It's not hard.
Yes, Prime Minister, death is terrifying, and at every moment our cells quake in fear of it. Magnificent. That's the thing that gives our life meaning. We're going to explain why, doing 5 things in Leader of Opposition. First, we're going to explain why you being the only person who's immortal was a terrible thing for them to concede from Prime Minister. Then, explain how you're going to weigh this debate out. Then give 3 arguments. Firstly, life is more meaningful when you do things at the expense of others. Secondly, death is the single most powerful motivator for people to actually go out and do things that give them life meaning. Thirdly, why novelty is necessary for pleasure, and why moving forward you find less and less things to enjoy in your life. What happens when you're the only immortal person in a world of other people? Firstly, it means all of your experiences, your family, all the people you grow to love, you see, die, and lose. And I think over the course of time, it becomes much more difficult to make those connections. For the same reason, when people, their spouses, they widow them, it's very hard for them to find that sort of deep, intimate connection with another person in the future. And imagine if this happens 500 times. I think it would be very hard to connect to the level that really derives meaning moving forward. But secondly, I think as you grow older and older, and you see more and more things, you become a different person. You're no longer a human being at this point. You're something different. And the wealth of experiences that you've had maybe are interesting, but I think make it impossible for you to truly connect with someone because they have such a massive gap between your lived experiences and the people who you talk to who've only been around for a mere 80 years as opposed to 8,000. I think this means if opening government relationships are impossible for you to maintain and derive any pleasure from whatsoever. How are you going to weigh this debate? I just want to point one thing out. They say, firstly, that the absence of living is bad for you. No, because there's no individual for that to be bad to. Me, in 80 years, can't be harmed because he doesn't exist. Me, when I was 2, has no interest in the present moment now because they don't exist. So how do you weigh this debate? In the acute experiences that people have in their life, because those are the only things that exist. Diggory is only the individual right now giving this speech at this very moment. The very nice breakfast I had earlier is not something I'm deriving acute pleasure from now. This is the thing we're going to prove to you with our 3 points of substantive. Firstly, life is meaningful when you do things at the expense of other things. My life is an experience that every single day I wake up, I go outside, and I craft the meaning that I derive from that life. I chose to spend quite a substantial amount of money coming to this tournament. I could have spent it on other things. I could have spent this time with my family, but I came here. And now, at this very moment, I'm fighting for my life in this debate. And that gives me an unbelievable amount of satisfaction. This is a rich, acute experience because there is a cost. I'm growing older and older. It is becoming less and less likely I will ever see a break at the World University Debating Championship. And I know that I need to not only accomplish this now, but that because I'm not going to have another chance, because I can't simply come back every other year, because I know someday I'm going to be too old to compete, I'm going to have to do other things with my life, I'll have to move on. This experience now is exhilarating. It is incredibly stimulating. I think you remove these things from government's world, and that's horrible. But secondly, choices are simply more meaningful when you have other options. It is unbelievable to have someone tell you that they want to spend their life with you because they are spending their life with you. To marry one individual means you are not choosing to marry someone else. And that means that person said, you are the person I want to spend my life with. I want to raise children with you because you're the best person who I feel I can make that choice with. This is not something possible in government's world, because you can always simply find a different individual. You can always simply experience something later when there's no cost to your experiences. They don't mean anything. If you're just doing something because it seems interesting, and, well, you'll see what the other thing is, you'll see what the other opportunity is. If you can live the same day a million times, no individual day is itself incredibly important and incredibly valuable. We think this is a horrible thing to do for people because their acute sensations are much less meaningful. And I want to point out, meaning is not necessarily pleasure. You can experience an infinite pleasure machine, but nobody's going to enjoy that experience because we care about meaning as individuals, not pleasure. Before I move on, opening.
You are afraid that you might not break right now because you are limited by time. But imagine if you are immortal. You have hundreds of tries at will on your NPE that allows you to actually reach your goals.
No, because the point, it's not whether or not you break that is valuable, it's the experience you have when you're fighting to break. That's what gives your life meaning. I don't think that's particularly true. Second argument, death as a motivator. The fact you're going to die is the single biggest thing that gets you to do stuff. Right? If you're going to write a book, well, if you die, you're not going to be able to write that book. So you better get on it right now. If you're eventually going to die, you're not going to have the opportunity to have children. You better go and do things that are difficult, do things that challenge you, actually do things. Notice in government's world, because you can infinitely kick the can down the temporal well, challenging things that are potentially uncomfortable, where you have to overcome a burden, like asking, taking the initiative to ask somebody out on a date, taking the initiative to do hard work to try and get a promotion, to try and advance your professional career. These are challenging. People need to be pushed to actually go and do these things. And death is the strongest motivation you can have, because you're not going to experience these things that are extremely meaningful if you can simply wait around and potentially experience them in the future. We think most likely for most individuals, this means you simply don't experience those extreme meaningful activities like getting married, like professional advancement, like artistic pursuits. You simply don't do them at all because you can always do them in the future. Most likely you simply do the thing that is least sort of difficult, and this is not particularly good. Thirdly, why is novelty necessary for pleasure? Notice that experiencing the same thing itself is less and less pleasurable the next time you do it. The first time you do something, it's incredible, it's a new experience. The second time, you're a bit more used to it. The 50,000th, 500,000th time, it's not particularly engaging. You notice that a lot of pleasurable things are pleasurable in this sort of immediate gratification way for very similar reasons. One brand of chocolate bar is not too different from another brand of chocolate bar. But what isn't? It's progressing through life stages. It's the first time you see your child talk to you. It's the first time you see your child graduate university. These are non-replicable experiences that you never ever have another thing to benchmark against. But a lot of the things opening government says are pleasurable simply reduce in pleasure over time. We prove on opening opposition, people's lives become dramatically less meaningful even if they're shorter. Vote OO.
Alright, can we have the Deputy Prime Minister to report the case? Here.
Alright, am I audible for both the stream and you guys?
Yes.
It's just what?
I actually also for the stream exam. I think you should.
Alright. Starting my speech in 3. Oh wait, hold on. My phone. 2, 1. I would just like to remind opposition of what the motion is about. Because it's not about whether or not it is actually better to live forever, or even if they agree that their future selves might regret it. It is about whether or not the person now would choose the decision to make immortal. And what they make the mistake of is that they make the assumption that people always make rational choices, that they aren't subject to emotions, and they aren't subject to the very lived experiences that fundamentally make them human. Here is the problem with their esoteric form of argumentation. They talk about all of these harms potentially hundreds of years in the future. What if you go around the world and you do all the things and there's nothing things left to do? What if you outlive your partner and you have to find another one? How would they know that these things happen? We can talk about them in a rational way, but to the extent that no other person is immortal, no other person can tell you, and no other person has a fixed reference point to actually suggest that this is a decision that I need to integrate within my choice today, probably suggests that these things are not meaningful. Listen to the massive comparison that we give on God. You know today a person who has died. You know today a person who is struggling with old age, probably shits themselves every single night because they're struggling with the death of their own body. These are things that people you know, that society tells you, and that even you will constantly experience to the extent that you have a detriment to your old age. I'm going to format my speech by talking about 5 structural reasons to why you wouldn't take these points into consideration, and then putting the concept goal now to suggest that these things are less important and we need to talk about things about you now. First point about having no individual point of reference. So to the extent that the average person today is probably 28 years old. So maybe some people have some degree of understanding of how time affects them throughout their life to make them not value certain things, or even the things that government suggests. Things like time pressure, things like the ability for you to pursue because you have a certain degree of anxiety. Here are 2 takeaways. The first takeaway is to suggest that if you are a 28-year-old today, time is limitless. Even if you believe that potentially you could run out of things, right now you're not running out of things, and in fact your time is short but material many because there's so many things that you want to do but you're physically unable. The second thing is to suggest that even if you rationalize that there is a certain point of reference to which you might feel bad, presumably you as a 28-year-old probably don't fear those things primarily because you are still creating these formative, formational experiences. Which is to suggest every single new relationship is exciting, every single new experience is exciting, so even if there is a regret of loss, to the extent that you find the new experiences more exciting than the experiences that you've had historically, you probably wouldn't regret them even if you felt like they might matter out. But secondly, even if long-term pain was going to be a problem, you would likely be able to rationalize it through other things. So let's take their example for instance. If they say that you're going to be very sad when your family dies, if you ask the average person today, what would you rather have? You die first or your family dies first? Presumably, they would always suggest that their family dies first because there's a presumption that if you love them, you would take care of them, you wouldn't want them to take care of you, and while you might recognize that you would be sad that once they die, you wouldn't want to subject them to the experience of you dying or have them feel sad because you died in the first place. Which is to suggest, this argument is self-defeating. If there are people that you love today, potentially it will be harder on them that they die, but it is significantly more important for you to make sure that they live comfortable lives. But thirdly, even if you're not going to be able to rationalize it, and it's going to be very sad for you, the way that I would suggest that you would be able to get through it is presumably because you as an individual have significantly more formative experiences take over it. While yes, death might be things that be bad for you, but to the extent that you have a significant degree of other goals that are likely going to continue and fill you with ambition, knowing that at the point you make this choice, you have a lot of long-term promises that can make you continue in the future, likely suggests that, one, your goal alignment self-corrects for the mechanism, which means that you're probably significantly more happier, and to compensate with all of the other things that you make in life, such as money, such as drugs, etc. But secondly, to the extent that you don't do that, it's not clear why the death of an individual necessarily makes it so that the lived experiences along the way don't work. The fourth thing that I'd like to talk about is the degrees of mitigation that we provide. That is to say that just because you live forever doesn't mean that this pain is constant. We provide a series of mechanisms. Whether you drug yourself up, whether you forget, whether it is potentially possible for things like immortality to be technologically feasible in the future. These things ultimately suggest that government opposition side can't just give the cheese of you have infinite suffering over infinite degrees of time when you have a degree of agency that comes with wealth that will only ever experience where you are at the point where you can see your life, see your investment, and see the technologies in 100 or maybe 1,000 years time. Take that POI from CJ.
Yeah, I mean, most people also don't really know that medicine will advance in the future. If this is about choice, would the person themselves know about the conditions of immortality, like not getting sick, etc.?
Well, yes, because presumably when you make the choice, they say this is what immortality is. But the second thing I would suggest is, here's where we move on to the secondism. How do these currently lived experiences likely make it so that you always want to make this choice? So the first thing I would like to suggest that, if you are a person in this age, it probably means that your life has been consistently going up. Whether it be society in the past 28 years of the world being some of the most economically dynamic, technologically innovative, whether it talks about the innovation of the internet, other technologies, and life-saving medication, would give the vast majority of people the perception that things get better. But secondly, even from a more historical perspective, while you are 28 years old, you have a historical understanding and a certainty that throughout years things have gotten better. The speculation of is much worse, because even if it could potentially be the case that things actually get worse, one, people have a rationalization mechanism that things get better, but people would be significantly more certain that at the very least, if I'm alive, I can protect other people silvering those circumstances, making sure that the world is better for them. The third thing I'd like to suggest here is that even if in certain instances you make an irrational choice and you recognize it fully, the weighing doesn't max out. Primarily because even if you believe everything that opposition says is true, the biological field will always max them out. Because here's where we kind of engage with the COPOI. Because it's not being religious, not religious or anything, but even the uncertainty of death is massive. If you are an atheist and you believe it is an eternal void, if you are a Christian and there's a potential chance that you have infinite suffering and infinite sadness, it is the fundamental perspective that you don't want to die today, and it becomes easily abstract that being dying is terrible, that there are people dying around you, and this is a fundamental choice that you want to avoid. Imagine the world of opposition time, where you don't make that choice, where you choose to live, and every single day you're living with the certainty that if you die today, it's your own fault, it's because you turned down that decision, and ultimately every single one of the potential consequences, the potential risk, and the essential life-saving choices becomes worse. In fact, the creation of this decision could actually make you live a worse life, to the extent that if you feel like you turn down the chance of immortality, you'd be immensely risk-averse. You'd never want to turn it up because you feel like you need to maximize your current life, and thus you wouldn't go out, but rather make sure that you don't choose to die, you don't take risks, and you don't think that could effectively change your bodily composition. In the conclusion of this debate, the average person has an immense fear of death, does uncertainty of the future, and would rationally make the choice to stay with their loved ones and stick with them even if it meant the torture of immortality. With that, I'm proud to.
Alright, thank you very much. That's the stuff. And we have the DLO to conclude the opening of the change. Here.
Am I good to begin? Fear is not enough for Side OG to win this debate. I am scared right now. I am anxious when I do high-stakes debates. And yet, that fear has been a net positive in my life because I still am motivated to do things like this. The fact that I am anxious proves that I care. It is indeed why I'm here. Let's first start with some general high-level analysis on what a this house prefers motion actually means. There's sort of two possibilities here. We were more or less engaging within the assumption that this was what is most in this person's interest. They were more or less engaging within the framework that it's more or less what they actually literally, descriptively would choose if given this option. I think we can win on both grounds very easily. First, on the rational grounds, they more or less concede that it would be actually in your cold, hard, rational interest to do this, so we easily go on those grounds. But then on the emotional grounds, as I'll explain a little bit later, I think there still will be a deliberation. You still will think through this choice. Why is that? Because it will be the single most monumental choice in your entire life. If we can come up with all the shit we did in 15 minutes, someone who's probably going to be spending a week, a month deciding this, he's probably also going to come up with all this crap. And also, if they're a normal human, will care about the potential, as I'll explain later, of basically eternal torment in the form of being, like, for example, on an empty earth, or the other horrible possibilities you outline, like being in a life where you can't form meaningful relationships with anyone. So I think we can win on both grounds. Next, let's go on to some comprehensive refutation. First, they talk about the idea that you're going to be the same age in their framing, and you'll remain this way all through your life. I think this actually buttresses our side, because if you're the same age, if you never change, if you never sort of grow, even in your body, this is going to fuck with your ability to have meaningful relationships with others, because often aging with a partner is a fundamental part of how you connect with them, how you feel sort of united with them. Next, they said there's a biological desire to be alive, and this outweighs everything. This is just categorically false, and this is the be-all and end-all. Oftentimes, this biological desire is overridden by rational considerations. For example, euthanasia. Many people opt in. Even suicide, tragically, often is sort of in by emotion. Also, old people who just think it's their time to go. There's many examples that we can give you that show that oftentimes this biological desire to be alive can be overridden, and we prove, just due to how severe all the crap we talked about is, that it will be overridden in this case. Next, on aging, they say it just sort of makes you feel out of control. But I think what we explain to you is often that you actually need some sort of restrictions on your freedom, not in the sense of totalitarian government, but just literally in terms of the available option sets that you have in order to make those individual choices meaningful. I'll expand on that later. But too much freedom can honestly be paralyzing. This is why when I load the Minecraft creative world, I play a little bit for the first 5-10 minutes, but I just can do literally anything, and so I don't care about anything, and nothing actually feels earned, whereas in Minecraft survival mode, where there's limited resources, constraints on my choice, things like beating the Ender Dragon are actually meaningful. Silly analogy, I know, but I think it's fine. Okay, next let's talk about, they said that you can help other people. The problem here is maybe a little bit, but you're going to feel fundamentally out of control in terms of whether you can help other people as time goes on. If you watch your kids die, you won't be able to do anything. You'll want to help them, but you'll be utterly powerless to be crushing and repeatedly so. Next, on living well, they say you will fulfill more ambitions. We already explained to you, yes, sure, you can fulfill more ambitions, but they won't be meaningful to you. Again, I'll expand on this a little bit later. But I'll grant them that on living well, you can probably start more businesses. Sure, totally. You can get more knowledge. Let's concede all of that. But we can easily outweigh that with just sort of relationships. Because most people prioritize their relationships over their jobs. Indeed, they often work to provide for their family. Relationships are often central to the average person's way of existing in the world. Lastly, we say the world is getting better. Climate change would like to disagree. Oftentimes, people, and generally 28-year-olds, are very pessimistic about the future, so even if we buy into their 100% emotional framework, I think we can still win on that point. All right, some more rebuttal. Next, they say that in the future, you can do drugs and memory wiping and all that stuff. I think there's honestly in tension with the rest of their case when they say that, well, you don't really care about the future, and then also, like, what exactly, I just don't fully understand this point. Also, as it was effectively POI, which I'm going to why whether they'll know that you can do this, and to what extent this will factor into your decision comes. Lastly, 2 more points. They say that you only care about the present if you're, like, for example, a 28-year-old, or at least you're very presentist. I think, reasonably speaking, we can say that I, for example, would care if you told me, hey, Nick, do you want to opt into something that in maybe 1,000 years will be absolutely hell for you, as I'll expand on later in my point on, like, the possibility of human extinction, or indeed a choice that will sort of in the mid to long term just be miserable for me. People care to some extent. People make retirement plans, etc. Lastly, all right, so with that aside, let's go on to state building before I give you an additional point on the denial of the afterlife. Actually, 2 additional points. Sorry, we have so many points. Okay, let's do some rebuilding. We explained to you that when you're the only immortal person, as they concede, oftentimes you'll just lose the ability to make meaningful connections with other people. This won't necessarily just happen in the long term. It'll even happen in the short term, in the medium term, within which you will indeed prioritize in terms of your attention. They respond that sort of you're just assuming people make rational choices, but we've already explained to you that, probably speaking, someone, an average person, is not so dumb that they won't be able to think about how normal relationships work. And also, it just seems to me like, okay, let's assume someone's really dumb, like just absolutely dumb. They will think very, very simply and think, oh, being immortal would make me just fundamentally different. Like, it's weird as we get in a POI from them. And so, if it's again purely emotional and not at all considering like the benefits of what could come of the drawbacks from immortality, I think we still can win on the grounds. POI?
I mean, again, you might know that there is a harm, but you can't grasp the harm. You can't weigh it. There's no point of reference. You know people who are old. You know people who are dying, and you can weigh that in your mind.
I'm sorry, I just don't like. I have never experienced being an old person who has no money, yet still I plan for retirement because I want to avoid that fate. You do not need to have personally experienced or even seen a horrible fate in order to not want to experience that fate. Lastly, we explained to you death is a motivator, no clear response, why novelty is necessary for pleasure, again, no clear response, and then the idea of doing things at the expense of other things making them meaningful, the response is that well, you'll just reach all your goals, but again, you'll feel hollow. Like, you'll feel if you broke worlds after like 1,000 years that you did so because of the unfair advantage that you have, and so like if I cheated in this round, I wouldn't feel good about winning this, I'll feel like a cheat, you won't feel vindicated. Last thing is denial of the afterlife. We're going to explain why the average person prefers death. Framing, average person is religious. Most people believe in something like heaven. Islam, Christianity, Judaism all agree. Most people also believe they're good, so they believe they're going to heaven. And most people believe that heaven is maximally desirable, both definitionally and because you can see your loved ones there. Immortality robs you of the afterlife, and so it robs you of what you believe to be your best case scenario. And so if we get through it purely emotionally, this matters way a lot. And so it also robs you of a large motivator for acting, doing all sorts of things. This also works for systems that don't exactly have things like heaven. Like Buddhism, for example, has reincarnation until you transcend reincarnation, and for Buddhists, they also really, really want to do this, is what they most want. So again, even if we're going totally emotional, this is sufficient to win on its own. But also, additional point, human extinction. It's very likely that we're probably going to be going extinct relatively soon. We've already gotten very close during the Cold War, when one Soviet soldier was the reason why we didn't have a nuclear winter. But also, we're getting close to climate change. And so, being alone for like millions of years on the Earth, setting aside the heat death of the universe and the expansion of the sun, which is beyond the scope of this debate, is probably going to be torture this outweighs any short-term harm. And yes, I think reasonably you can conceptualize it to some extent. So even if this is just about what emotionally would these people do, we win, and they've basically conceded that if it's about what their interests are and what they would rationally choose, we also win. We win on all grounds. So proud to oppose. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Can we invite the member of government to begin the closing half exchange? Here. Bro.
What's that?
Someone's playing a piano.
Hi. We have to get someone to stop playing the piano.
I think that's a nice background.
Thank you.
For that.
Well, it's very special for me.
Fair enough. Aww.
Just looking at talking about immortality instead of the piano.
It's just such a nice background.
We live under the illusion of choice. That we believe that our preferences are something that we have intrinsically. We're going to say that's not the case. We think that your preferences are constructed by the very society that you live in and constrained by your own mortality. That is to say that only when you have a variety of experiences can you truly understand what is it you want in life, and that intrinsically is prior to all their claims about preferences, and that beats and is prior to the old claims about marriage and why that's so intrinsically good. Because you positive, the only reason why you think it's good is because everyone else tells you it is so, and the point at which we can show you that more lived experiences, understanding that living alone may actually be your preference is actually something that you get on our side of the house. Before we move to that, some extraneous responses towards their case, right? They tell you that death is a great motivator. 3 responses to this, right? Firstly, their first argument concedes that you already intrinsically as a person seek out meaning. That is to say, you want to find meaning in things you do. It doesn't make sense, therefore, that death is the motivation for trying to do things. Insofar as you're trying to find meaning in your life, and everybody wants to know why 42 is the answer in the movie, right? That's what you're trying to do, and you're conditioned to try and find. But second of all, right, the whole argument of diminishing marginal returns also suggests that when you try to do something for a long period of time, you get bored, and therefore you will continue to therefore seek other things to do. Well, okay, I'll respond to the marginal returns later, but the important point here to note is that the fact that things will eventually get bored means that you will continue to move and look at different things, right? And then under this argument, they tell you that, oh look, there's non-replicable things that matter. I'm going to posit to you a simple thing, right? Does it matter that things are non-replicable? Because for some people, it does. What does this mean? It means that you remember your first kiss a lot, you remember the first time you had sex, and you value it a lot. But for some people, who gives a shit, right? I barely remember what happened the first time, right? The important point here to note, therefore, is that it doesn't matter to every individual person that these are non-replicable. It means that some people, these things are replaceable because they're not as important. That means that maybe my partnership with Isabel is temporary only for this world, and it doesn't matter to me. Or maybe because actually she's really important and I care a lot. Regardless of the point, it matters later in time, and it doesn't mean something that you know at the very beginning when you're engaging in sex activity, right? And last important thing, the important crux of their argument is to prove that motivation is time sensitive. All they show you is that you want to win worlds. That is intrinsic of time. That's not you have to win worlds now. That's not you there's a pressure to win worlds, right? That's to say that at any point in time, maybe 30 years from now, you could still win worlds and you could still be just as happy because there are other intrinsic motivations. What are they? For example, I just want to damn win. I just want that trophy and I want that label to my name. It doesn't matter when or how I did it. That's why some people come back as dinos in spite of the massive embarrassment it takes for you to come in your 4th university to try and win worlds. The important point here to note, therefore, is that there's no time sensitivity to certain things and achievements in life. And some people just want to go through the struggle. Some people just want to try very damn hard and struggle every day to make things happen, right? And those are extrinsic motivations. That doesn't mean that death is their only thing. So unless they can prove to you that death is therefore that tipping point, they aren't able to reach any of their impacts, right? So on to my argument then. Why are there coercive pressures in life? Why do they shape our preferences, and therefore how do we change this on our side of the house, right? 4 reasons why, for example, right now, you're unable to achieve whatever you want in life, right? First of all, right, because there's a massive amount of societal backlash in society, right? That's to say, that push you against being selfish. They tell you things like, for example, you must work for other people. Why? Because fundamentally, when lives are short, you're unable to, for example, work on things by yourself to achieve your ends, because you can't work on it for ages, right? So you want to double and multiply the amount of work and to divide it amongst a bunch of people, right? That means you suggest things like familial narratives. It suggests things like, for example, you must get married. It suggests things like partnership as intrinsically important in society, right? But second of all, because the average person in this world likely has no capacity, right? We're even willing to bite bullet. The average person may come from like a really poor neighborhood, right? And may have no resources whatsoever. But in any case, when you have a long life, you can actually change those things with the skills that you have, right? I want to give you a bit more things and ability than opening opposition and opening government does, right? Not only are skills
arbitrary at the point now, they can change in the future. That's to say, like average person may be average now, but may be less average as time goes on. Especially in the post-capitalistic world, where there's maybe 10 people, that one person becomes damn important because it's 1 out of 10 as well, right? What it suggests that over time, your averageness may also change and evolve in a way that makes you important. More importantly, skills can be learned in a very easy way, right? Learning a language is something that just takes time. Learning, for example, another coding skill takes time. All these means that you can improve yourself over time and therefore create the capacity that you lack in the status quo. But more importantly, right, it also means that right now you have to settle for less. That is to say that in society, you're constrained by this notion that you just settle for things, right? It means you have to accept those trade-offs that they set up themselves, right? That means that for them, in their world, the old person has the least utility. Because when you grow old, you have less ability to trade off anything at all. Because at that point in time, you are not able to make any choice. You're poor, constrained to your chair, etc. So their case is all about how you have trade-offs and how it excites you in life. The older you get, your argument becomes less important. Because as old as you get, you have less ability to trade off. You just feel constrained. You feel like shit in their world by their own characterization, right? No thank you. That's why you think where you people settle for less, toxic marriages, etc. Therefore, what we demonstrate to you here, right? What you get is you can create your own preferences. When you can live a variety of living experiences, you can escape what society tells you is important. You can experience different things and understand from different perspectives whether or not something is important to you or not. This is why we think it's important. And let me weigh this quickly against opening, right? What we achieve here is we show you how you find true happiness. Because happiness right now is constrained by what society tells you. And oftentimes society sets you up for things that you cannot achieve because they want you to struggle. Capitalism wants you to work forever so you can try and achieve the idea of a good lifestyle. The point where you can choose to try that for one lifetime of 100 years. Realize, actually, fuck this, I want to live as a Buddhist monk. You can go and do that, right? In our world, you can't. By the time you realize it's too damn late and you are about to die. In our world, we change that to the point where you have an infinitely long lifetime. You're going to experience different types of lifestyles and construct the preference that you want to have and maximize it. And this is prior to all their arguments who are contingent upon what they believe is the conception of a good life. What we bring to you ultimately is to show you what it means to be free. What it means to actually exercise agency in the point of a society, right? It's only when you're able to understand what you really want and the capacity to understand that through living through multiple experiences where you're actually able to maximize those preferences as well. Before we move on to the last bit, go ahead.
Unlimited time is not unlimited resources. You can try to win worlds, but you have to graduate, or maybe ChatGPT replaces all of us. I'm unsure why you are free in one singular instance.
So, let me explain why you are able to have this ability to do those things, right? Because one, as I said earlier, things change over time, skills become less relevant or more relevant depending on certain situations, right? Especially if you believe the world's going to shit, means that you as a person is immune to stuff according to OG, or maybe you're not immune, right? Just because you know things that happened in the past, because you can see trends before they occur, means you can also preempt certain things that happen in life, right? And that's why you also posit that in a society they live in the world that happens, right? And this is something that OG doesn't give you, is likely to move at a smaller pace, right? People like to think that worlds are random, right? That this world changes very quickly without any understanding, right? But oftentimes there are historical trends, right? That's why we study history. The things that move at glacial paces and small things that change. We knew that there's a prospect of global war. We can prepare for those things. As an individual who has lived a long lifespan, you can prepare for those changes and prepare for the skills that may be relevant in the future. You can see the tech move happening ages ahead of time, right? Because you know that, for example, you can see somebody invented the light bulb ahead of time, right? All these things demonstrate to you that a world that's more interconnected and a world that moves forward where information becomes easily and more shared and probably becomes more integrated means that individuals can perceive the future and protect themselves and have therefore the ability to prevent themselves from living in the worst possible circumstances. So not only do we prove ability over and above our OG, we also prove why you get the best ability to actually create your preferences, which is prior to any of the argumentation on specific preferences that you want to have, right? Because you understand all this, we are so proud to propose.
Alright, thank you very much. Can we have the opposing oppositions member up to introduce your case here?
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. You may fear death, but what I fear more is living. Because in the world of their side, you're going to have a significant decrease of your quality of life and will have to eventually forego the average life that you wanted to make coming from opening government. Before I move on to the extension, I'm just going to have a bit of strategic call-outs in response towards their side. First, there's a contradiction between member of government and prime minister. Because if they say from prime minister that the most important thing in the debate is about making the choice for yourself, then he cannot make the argument that you need to make decisions for your future self and pursue future interests and different skills, right? Which means case that opening government takes this over, closing government as a result. But second of all, we think that there's also a problem with their side. Because just because you're immortal doesn't mean that you're invincible, doesn't mean that you're omniscient. Because you still feel illness, you just won't die from it. You also don't have the ability to access what the future world is likely to look like, which we're going to frame later to going to be a lot worse coming from their side. We're going to engage with their metric. If it is truth, the most important thing in the debate is trying to protect your average life, that it is far worse under their side in a world where you have no ability to actually pursue that. Let's move on to the first extension now, given that, and a lot of the responses are going to be integrated. The first extension is why you significantly decrease the quality of life over time as a result of the gradually decreasing world, making it a lot worse. Take note that there's some semblance of this in the deputy leader proposition when they talked about world extinction, climate change at 6 minutes and 30 seconds, but don't actually prove why exactly this is going to be the case. Right, so let's outline what specifically are the global impacts that lead to a lot of disasters. Things such as health crises and pandemics. Climate change that destroys homes. Economic inequality and the fact that scarcity exists. But there are a couple of structural reasons why this is impossible to fix, and you have no meaningful ability to be able to get the utopian world that their side want to talk about of life-saving medicine. First, a lot of governments are unable to solve this as a result of politicization that prevents them from being able to interact properly. Number two, the ability to get the technological progress that opening of government says so badly only takes happen after the fact. And once you're able to get things like vaccines, the experience becomes too late because your friends would have died as a result of the new pandemic that would have existed, or for instance, climate change destroying the home that you wanted to build for yourself. Third, often there is an incredible amount of collective action problem because it requires buy-in from other different people and citizens as a result. But given the fact that a lot of people are self-interested, a lot of corporations exist to want to lobby governments against specific types of regulation, that you don't get that. But the last reason is, it's a simple matter of fact that bigger problems are more complex. As time progresses, they're even bigger, right? And at a certain point, there's going to be a great wall that prevents you from being able to solve the new problem. Here's where I respond towards their side and engage with their side, right? Because their side give the response that, well, it doesn't matter because what matters the most is yourself. Yeah, exactly. Because if you want to live an average life now, you will not be able to live that average life when you become immortal because you have below average standards of conditions. You have no ability to live a home which is the same home that you lived a while ago because it's drowning as a result of climate change. You're unable to access any of the benefits of trying to be able to pursue any specific interest because guess what? You're poorer as a result of scarcity, which means that all of their arguments of the fact that you could do X, you could do Y, doesn't happen given that you have no meaningful capacity, given that the world around you has changed in such a way that prevents you from being able to access the sources of meaning that that's why you wanted to have. The response that you're coming from the leader proposition about this is, well, Minecraft exists and there are constraints, right? But take note that we told you that this time progressives, those constraints come as a result of immortality, so we think that ours is more nuanced, right? Let's weigh this argument over opening opposition. One, the impact is a lot bigger because yes, they proved that you receive trauma from personal inability to reach sources of meaning, but what we prove to you is that the quality of life significantly worsens, which means that the impact is bigger. But number two, it engages with their side what to say, because if it's true that you want to live an average life, you don't do that in the future, because take note that the future is just more future presence, right? Let's move on to the second extension to explain why you're more likely going to forego your own identity and your meaningful capacity to live the same life that you want to have. Before I move on, I'll take TPI from OJ.
Even if in 100 years the average standard of living decreases, you're not an average person in 100 years. You're the top 1%. You have all of the degrees. You're already wealthy to avoid and build a new house.
No. Because we told you that scarcity prevents you from being able to have that educational access. Or the fact that because you become poor, you don't get that. Or as a result of climate change, you don't get that new home. Your ability to access those resources diminishes, which means that you have no meaningful capacity. This is the method that you say that you just disregarded. Let's move on to the second extension of why you forego identity. I want to be very clear about this. The average person wants to continue living an average life, but you're unable to. Because in order for you to maintain your average position, you need to stop other people from finding out about your own immortality. Because the biggest threat to your average life is people being able to understand that you're mortal. Governments finding out that that guy is 300 years old. Why is he still benefiting from our healthcare system? Or friends that realize, why are you not aging, right? Because this creates a massive amount of unwarranted popularity to be like, hey, no, this is going to be a guy that we need to talk to, interview, and as a result is unwarranted attention. Which means that there's going to be an incentive for this person to force themselves to forego past interest to protect your new average life. But the problem is that this comes at the expense of removing your past life. It comes at the expense of making new friends and forgoing all the old friends you've made. Going into a new town where you're more unfamiliar with the conditions as a result of trying to escape the government, trying to surveil you and make sure that you're in those places. Right? You're going to need to move to another country. Why exactly is this important? Because if it is true that you care about your identity now, then there's a certain harm of you losing that identity in the future. Because you're going to not be yourself. You're going to have to pursue different interests that engages with closing government. Because it's unclear. Why do you want to live a new world where you want to start painting? Why do you want to live a new world where you want to start being, a world champion, even though it's okay to, for instance, lose in this specific scenario, right? We have no specific epistemic access to know what you want to do in that specific future. And the problem is that if it is most important to want to protect your ability to change that, then we think that's a lot better. A couple of extreme responses now, right? So, first of all, weighing over opening opposition, so this is the response, it's just weighing. Note that their side wanted to explain that meaning is important, right? But take note that our argument is analytically prior, given that we're able to tell you that your ability to have meaning is contingent on first proving that the life that you are going to live in the next couple of days as a result of immortality will be the same life that you would end up living. But given the second argument proving why you forgo your identity, that will not happen, which beats out the government contingency coming from their side. But lastly, let's engage with a lot of the other things that they want to talk about. So their side said, well, you know that you're going to have a better life in the future. Again, this is uncertain. Their side want to provide additional analysis that you feel guilt as a result of not making this choice. But no, we think that that's not going to be the case because you're going to feel a massive amount of guilt given the second argument that we proved to you because of the fact that you're going to have to forgo your old life, which means that you're going to have to forgo old friends, you're going to have to forgo your old cultural connections, and for those reasons, it's bad for that person in present. For those reasons, opposed.
Alright, thank you very much. And we have the government split to begin to end the debate for the House.
I'm losing my voice a bit, so if you can't hear me, just wave and I'll try my best to talk a little bit louder. Otherwise, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just dealing with CO and then taking out OO and then weighing burns material against OG. Firstly on CO. The first question asked here about this frame about how the current you isn't the same as the future you is that I generally just don't understand. Maybe I have a very small brain, but is that the present you also have to take into account what you value in the future. That's why, for instance, people engage in future planning. That's why, for instance, I'm doing this damn hard university degree because I generally just want to get a good job in the future. That means the you at the present also values what the you in the future is likely to be like, what they're likely to enjoy, what they're likely to be able to experience. Secondly, the premise of CO's case is that the world is changing and therefore it will be bad and inhospitable, you shouldn't want to live in it. The first thing to note here is that historically that's just untrue. You have a general trajectory of humankind being able to achieve upward development. This looks like better sanitation from now compared to the Victorian era. This looks like 2, technological advancements because people are driven to lead better lives and do have the capacity and increased capacity in fact to engage in those technological advancements that make life better. But 3, the response here is very clear that comes out of Burns' speech, which is that the benefit of immortality is that you live long enough to be able to predict trends. You know that in future there might be certain problems that crop up. So if you know that global warming and climate change is going to be a problem, you move to a cooler area, you move to an area where you're less likely to be affected by rising sea levels, for instance. But even if problems develop over time, they also increase in urgency, which means that government agencies, you yourself, also have more capital and political capital and also economic capital to be able to solve those problems. That's the reason why, for instance, we have a lot of agreements at the COP to engage in practices that minimize the impact or at least mitigate the impact of climate change in future. Thirdly, this argument is uncomparative because it doesn't deal with what the counterfactual they have to contend with, which is that you necessarily have to contend with death. Death is equally problematic for the variety of reasons that OG gives you. But what we explained to you here, and the difference here that makes us prior to OG is that 1, the immortality allows you to exercise agency over your circumstances. This is important because death is literally the most agency minimizing act that is out there. You have no ability to control the circumstances in which you die, how you die, and what happens after you die. So the argument about afterlife doesn't matter on those same metrics. Consequently, the difference here is that that when it comes to immortality, even if your future life might be shit, you are able to make discrete choices that allow you to exercise better agency in future. This looks like hoarding capital so that in future you have better savings to insulate you against potential economic shocks that you might see coming. This looks like better housing that allows you to avoid the problems of capital or climate change. So I think that's CO out as well. But then CO says, you have to forgo your identity because as an average person, you want to preserve your life of being average. Firstly, this nice OO who says that people are unsatisfied by a life of engaging in mundane activities. So either one of those characterizations have to be true. It cannot be the case that people are A, satisfied by mundane activities, but B, unwilling to not want to do challenging things. That's just damn strange. You have to pick one or the other. Secondly, I think there's a couple of reasons as to why, as an average person, what you're likely to aim for is a better life as opposed to maintaining an average life. And this takes out the premise of CG because insofar as we disprove this, any impacts about having to change your identity necessarily fall. Couple of reasons for this, which is that one, as an average individual, you have lived sufficient years to know that a life of being average is oftentimes painful and tiring. It looks like having to struggle for a job. It looks like having to make savings for the future. Those are things that an average individual just doesn't enjoy because it comes at a personal cost to you. Pouring hours into your work is just inherently unenjoyable to individuals. They are likely to want to strive for a lifestyle where they don't have to do that in future. But secondly, is that current media oftentimes hypes up the ability for you to drive sports cars or to engage in enjoyable activities that require huge amounts of capital. So it's unclear to me why you would want to retain that life of averageness. Even if everyone else in the world knows that you're immortal, that's great. Because now you can throw big parties, they come to your house, they talk big about how rich you are. If anything, I think that maximizes your ability to have a better identity. But the last question to ask here is this identity actually important? I.e., is it constructed or is it inherent? Bert explains to you that the problem with a single lifetime is that oftentimes your preferences are dictated and controlled by societal circumstances. For instance, people only like to listen to K-pop because it's powerful and interesting at this present moment. If I was born 70 years earlier, I would have been into 50s music or something. Those are preferences that are not inherent to you. They're constructed by the fact that your friends and family enjoy those things. That society dictates that as the correct thing to engage with. But also, societal expectations tend to be very punitive for the average individual. There's a lot of expectations that you work a 9-to-5 job. Even if you want to be a freelancer who does other shit. That's why I'm doing a law degree, even though I think that generally it's just really painful and I really wouldn't want to do it in the counterfactual. Therefore, identity in our world is constructed in the vacuum of status quo. What changes in our world is that the ability for you to live across a span of time allows you to actually access what you truly are like, independent of social expectations, because those social expectations shift over time and you're no longer constrained by those frameworks. So the real you and the ability to get identity is something that we unlock in our world. Secondly, dealing with OO. They say being the only immortal is bad because you lose your loved ones. Firstly, happiness tends to a median. That's why you tend to get over it when your relatives die. I know that sounds really harsh, but it's true. But secondly, is that if death truly is an inevitable part of life, as they say, then surely this only serves to add value to your life because now you know how to cope with loss, now you know how to live without certain individuals in your life and you know how to move on. But secondly, they say it's very difficult for you to form new relationships because as an immortal, you lack the ability to connect with individuals on the ground. Firstly, is that that's not true. Connection tends to be based on social experiences and circles. That means you become friends with your co-workers, even if they come from entirely different backgrounds and you don't share the same lived experiences. But secondly, in the counterfactual in their world, how the hell do old people make friends? Because surely this is true. Old people will never talk to kids, but I'm still great friends with my grandpa and my random uncles that he meets on the street. Thirdly, even if it's true that it takes a long time for you to reform relationships in the aftermath of someone dying, then surely trauma in their world lasts throughout their lifetime. In our world, at the very least, you have a longer runway to get over those days and to construct the true you. Secondly, they say the meaning of life is an incentive to do challenging things. Now I want to point out attention here that I think it immediately takes OO out this way, which is that OO says that mundane tasks are not pleasurable, therefore a long life makes it difficult for you to enjoy yourself. But at the same time and in the same speech, they say you have no incentive to do challenging things, which is true. One piece of categorization cannot outweigh the other, so we necessarily have to take one half the case and not the other. Secondly, we prove both incentive and capacity to enjoy things. And the incentive here is very clear, which is that you only know what you want when it's being explored over time, when you genuinely are able to construct your experiences rather than those preferences being forced upon you. Secondly, we prove capacity. In that capacity allows you, in that a longer lifetime, being immortal allows you to unlock capital. Because whereas you would otherwise always be an average ordinary individual with an average ordinary salary, you are now able to experience the possibility of you not being an average individual in the future where your skills are being valued. But two, you have a longer runway to develop important skills that allow you to acquire the capital that unlocks the capacity for you to go bungee jumping or to go skydiving on a daily basis. So if anything, we win on both incentive and capacity. Why do we take our above OG? Because firstly, OG tells you stuff about death and how you get to live better in our world. But all the analysis about preference construction comes prior to that. Because their case assumes that you know what you want, and therefore removing the aspect of death allows you to unlock utility from those things. The only way in which they are able to win this argument is if they prove that what what you think you want genuinely is what you do want. And birth proves that to you. But secondly, by proving that you have an increased capacity in future to 1. Predict trends, 2. Acquire skills, and 3. Acquire capital to unlock the true preferences that you enjoy, this breaks the opening deadlock. And whether life or death is more like speculative or more scary. Both are speculative, but in our life is preferable because you exercise agency to maximize the preferences that you genuinely have. Incredibly proud to propose.
Alright, thank you very much, Government Whip. Can we invite the opposition whip to end the debate as a whole here?
Hello. Hello to the friends and family back home on the street. Always fun to say that. The choice allows you unlimited time. It does not afford the world the same privilege. You may have technological advancements, but futile attempts to delay climate change doesn't work on you. Because unlike most debates, this is not a debate of long-term, short-term. This is a debate of live time and be forever or floating on a rock that may collapse in the next few decades or the next few centuries. Which means that already on weighing all of the benefits of both golf teams, assume that you will live maybe 100 years, maybe 500 years, but does not assume a world where you never die at all, which means that because the amount, not just of suffering, but the amount of loneliness you will feel when the world has collapsed, when the apocalypse has entered, and you are on a rock that is unable to be fixed at all, beyond technological advancements, where you are not just delaying climate change, but you are facing a world where climate change is in front of you, you are unable to ever change it. That's the extension we explained, that the world itself collapses, and that is a far bigger benefit than you getting meaning, because independent of meaning that I think you can derive on either side, what we specifically provide is that the world is going to be destroyed, nuked out of the universe, the society you know as it exists no longer happens at a point where the sun destroys the earth. You will still live through that, and they never give a reason at closing dog why that's good. First, I'll deal against opening opposition. Second, I'll deal with decision making versus OG. And lastly, I'll deal with infinite power versus CG, which I just don't think is true. Like, I mean, Captain America lived so long, I just don't think he really was very happy. Firstly, opening against opening opposition. They give us two things. The first and biggest part is on meaning. And so, while I value this and I do think it's meaningful for people potentially to struggle, there are two problems. First, it's unclear why this is something that's generalizable to that particular average individual. I.e., I think both OG and CG correctly point out that different actors derive meaning in different ways. Like, I think Victor Finkel had that nice little book or whatever. Different actors in different cultures derive meaning from different things, and therefore I think while potentially some individuals derive meaning from struggle, I don't understand why individuals who constantly are oppressed derive meaning from it, and so I don't think they necessarily explain why it's applicable in the instance, or why uniquely secondly, struggle only happens when there is a limitation on time. In fact, we still struggle in life as they explain at closing government. You are likely to still struggle in being able to study, still struggle in being able to live it and have different, seeing every individual side. I think that means that the intrinsic problem with opening opposition is they never explain why the struggle itself is unique under opening opposition. What we better explain is, the only certain thing is the world is finite and will likely disappear. At a point where this is what is certain, the better choice for you to make is likely to be able to either limit your life. Maybe it's not worth it for you to work 60 hours under a capitalist society. Maybe it's not great for you to be a woman in the Philippines for whatever that's constantly being oppressed. The difference is under our side. At the very least, you do not have to witness the world, not just as you know it socially, but the world itself in terms of being able to at least have technology is something that still exists. That allows us to think about opening opposition, but sure.
I mean, if you're rich, you can get on a rocket ship and leave. But secondly, how do you know what 1,000 years of loneliness is like if you're 28?
Oh yeah, first because the world in the media is often sensationalist and negative, you're probably aware climate change will sink the island you live in. But secondly, you outlive any habitability on Earth. The majority of pop culture tells you that apocalypses will happen, and that is the socially you're told that will likely happen at the point where you have things like 2012, and that's why you're very scared of it. But also thirdly, I just don't know, I don't think you would know you'd be rich by your own mechanism, so I don't understand why that's true. If you're average, you often have an average salary, you cannot imagine a world where you're likely to be that rich. But also thirdly, I just don't know why you're able to know that there is going to be a spaceship, like where are you gonna go, bro? The universe will destroy itself, like what the fuck, man? The second I went away against opening opposition is the DLO 630 point about how the world will die. And I 100% agree with this. This is the extension. The problem with DLO is there's a logical gap they don't explain. I.e., why there's a permanent problem you have to face that uniquely member of opposition explains. We explain structurally why the world is worse off, and you're not just likely to be sad, but you're likely to be lonely when the world passed by and destroyed. And you'll have to live on an island that often is globally sinking said this right now, like to be rich, but even if you're rich, it's likely to still be something that outweighs any potential benefit of physicality. That I was thinking about opening opposition, but sure, closing off.
Yeah, either way something is uncertain. Do you die or content with the possibility of going to eternal hell? Or
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
take a chance at self-discovery and enjoyment for a few good years before the world
Yeah.
goes to shit?
I'm glad you considered it's also uncertain, because on your side, everything is still uncertain. The world is still uncertain. You do not give them agency, as CG rehashes from OG, but rather, you multiply uncertainty when you live not 50, not 100, not 1,000, but unlimited experiences. You are unsure about what you will be subject to. Maybe it's the rise of robots, maybe it's the rise of other individuals. You're more likely to be scared shitless, and that is why the uncertainty is flipped. How does this deal with opening government? Opening government's claim is that people, when they make decisions, irrationally fear death because they have no frame of reference and they do nothing. I'll just fly that DPM concedes that you would know the conditions of immortality, so I presumably say that you would likely know certain things. But secondly, the problem with this is it narrows the debate to the point of killing Prime Minister, because I'm unsure why people would be aware of new drugs to let them forget bad memories, or would be aware that money would still be a currency used when they invest later on. That means I don't think it's very likely that these individuals are going to make these decisions. But, as I explained, individuals are probably more scared shitless of being immortal because there are more things that are beyond their control, as opposed to knowing that presumably in the next 50 years and the next 100 years, these are things you can predict. You cannot predict what happens, as they say in the far-off future, and that is something most individuals are probably likely to be aware of. But secondly, most average people like being average, in the sense that they often have average dreams, average goals. It's very hard for them to conceive of a world where I will be Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. And that means most individuals probably do not believe that they are going to be able to be as rich as they say. The comparative is, on our world, you think the world is not getting better for the three reasons I said in response to their POI, but also secondly, I just think that most individuals probably are quite negative. There's an issue of nihilism. Most of us hate ourselves, most of us hate the world. I think in most instances, most individuals probably view the world to be something that's going to collapse, and that means that they're probably not very happy with the prospect of living forever. They say you have wealth to protect yourself that is shared by closing government as well in terms of their reasons for why you're going to be omniscient. And this is a shared response to both CG and OG. The first is you're not going to be omniscient. It takes a long time to learn everything, and so you still have imperfect information. You're not likely to know what the best investments are. More and more information gets reduced over time, you never know about it. But secondly, the second extension that Evo explains answers this. You can't ever fully integrate in society, and there's a prerequisite for CG analysis about you being able to separate yourself conceivably of psyche, which means you're unable to hold a job. You're unable to claim that money. That money may exist, but you're never able to access it at a point where A, you might be exposed by it, and therefore will likely be negatively affected at a point where people view you to be quite weird. But secondly, you're unable to leverage that socially, because most individuals, if they are religious, are likely to antagonize you at a point where they view you to be someone who is questionable. Which negates CG's claim about how you're able to have infinite power, but also negates the claim that you're able to escape. What this means is you do not have infinite money. You are limited by humanity regardless, because you might be immortal, but the world is not. For these reasons, Seal wins.
Alright, thank you very much. Most of this, you all now. That's it.
Has the screen empty now?
Don't please remove the camera in this room because we are.
The light has now completed.